So, first thing you need to do is just clear down the workspace of everything. It will just really help you think logically as you're printing. Then once it's clear, you will need your ink tray with your damp cloth somewhere close by, with obviously your roller and your artist's knife and the ink. So next to that, put down a piece of white scrap A4 paper or bigger size, just scrap paper. It's just going to be as a inking area, so that when you've inked up your roller, this is where your lino is going to sit, your print plate, as you're inking it up. So it will get dirty after each time that you've inked it up. So if you keep your stash of A4 scrap paper close by, each time it gets too messy, you can just lay another sheet over the top, and it'll just help you trying to keep things as clean as possible. The area next to that is going to be your printing area. So inking area, printing area, if you were to go into a print studio, they would probably be at opposite ends of the room. The idea is really that you keep the wet, dirty ink area away from the clean printing area, because even just microscopic bits of ink will get on your fingers, and to let all this work go to waste if you just put a big dirty fingerprint on the middle of your print is very frustrating. So yeah, ink tray, ink area, print area. Your cards or whatever base it is that you're using to print onto, just have that to hand close by, so you don't have to go and fetch it from somewhere else. Because what people generally do is they'll get their lino, they'll ink it up, they'll pick it up, it'll be inky in their fingers and everything, and they won't have anything ready to print onto, so then they'll go off to get the clean pristine white surface to print onto, and then cover it in fingerprints. So general rule, take your print surface first before you do anything else. Prepare that and put that down in position, ready, so that when you've inked up your plate, it's there. You don't have to do anything else other than think about positioning it and printing it. We're going to do registration by eye. And when I say registration, I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, it's the lining up. So this quite nice square fits inside the square quite nicely. We're going to, as a beginner's class, we're just going to do it by eye. You can get fancy things out there to help you line it up. And there's another technique of lining it up that I'm going to show you in a second. But I just want us to have a go at just doing it by eye to begin. It doesn't matter if it's not 100% straight. They're quite nice where they're a little bit wonky anyway. And then each one has got its own little character. And everybody who you give it to or sees it knows that it's been 100% handmade. Okay. So, choosing colour. I'm just going to use one of my pots that is available from a shop that's included in the kit, for anyone who got the kit. And I'm going to use my artist palette knife to take out a blob. And by a blob, if I said the size of a butter bee, maybe, just twizzle it as you're lifting it out. Try and keep things as tidy as you possibly can. It will go quite far. You'll be surprised at how many prints you get out of that small amount. And I'd just say go with less to start with, and then add if you need more. If you're finding it's a bit too dry and it's producing a print that's not got enough ink on it, then you can just go again and add some more to it. I think that's the best way to do it, rather than put too much ink on. What ends up happening is you put the lid back on as well, so it will start to dry out. You put too much ink on, I think we mentioned this before, it'll start to sit inside those grooves and those channels, and it just won't print, it'll just be a blank. So, but if it's a bit faint, then you can get away with it. So it's better if it's too faint than it is too inky, and it will take forever to dry out as well. They will take 2 or 3 days after you finish printing your batch. I'd put them on the side and forget about them in another room or something for a few days, 3 or 4 days even, just to dry out properly before you give it to somebody, because they will mark. Let's take your roller or your brayer. For your ink, you just start to roll, just roll away. And you can roll in like this. And it's got a really nice sound to it, like a clacky sound as you begin to roll. And so about rollering, you don't and you shouldn't push down with too much force, too heavy-handed. You don't need to, and it doesn't make any difference. And all you're going to do is hurt your wrist over time. That's just going to be really tiring. And all it does is it pushes the ink around. And what you're actually trying to do by preparing the ink in this way is you're wanting to get lots of air. You're working the ink, getting the air in. You're activating it and getting it into a consistency where it's less runny, more tacky, more sticky. And you can hear that tack. Hopefully you can hear that tack in the background there. If you find that you've got too much ink, and how would you know if there's too much ink? You should, it's like a bit like sausages sizzling on a barbecue. If you've got that really nice clacky noise, then that's good. And it should start to take on a matte appearance. If it's still kind of gooey, if it's still looking quite gooey, then you've got too much ink. If you do feel like you've got too much ink on there and it's not got this really nice micro texture on it, then you can use the bottom section of your rollering tray just to get rid of some of that ink. That's fine too, and you can see you've got much less ink and it gets finer and finer as you go. The best, it's really difficult to tell somebody when is the right time, especially on online class. When is the right time, when is the ink ready, but it's really going to be down to experience, and it's going to be down to what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like in your hand. But let's have a go. This is now right for me to start adding the ink to the lino plate. So just I do it one roll at a time, and then I go back and go one roll, one roll, one roll. And you're transferring the ink. Think of it as transferring it from the ink tray to the ink plate. You can actually turn the piece of paper as you're rolling. So once you've transferred some ink over, like I did then, 3 or 4 transfers of ink, then you don't need to add any more ink. And hopefully you can see now how much ink is on it. It's not very much at all. But I'm deciding what I'm doing is I'm really rollering quite a lot over the surface of the linoleum to spread it around as consistently as I possibly can to get it into all the detail, because I want all that detail printed. Okay, I think this is ready to print now. And it's, like I say, it's not about being heavy-handed. All that's going to do is hurt your wrist, hurt the roller. It's about lots of rollering in lots of directions to make it as consistent as possible. Flip your roller upside down. There'll be a lip that allows it to sit the other way up and stops the rubber from getting damaged. Once you've got your lino, carefully, with your left and right fingers, flip it over, get to a position where you're quite happy, roughly central, and then just push down. You can see now this is the point at which you need your damp cloth and your dry cloth. So, having your scrap paper to hand, you can place a piece over the back of the lino and rub. If you did have a spare roller, this is an ideal point to get that roller and just roller over the back. But hand pressure is fine. Keep moving. And then you can choose to either remove your lino at this point, or what I like to do is rub it from the reverse side. So if I just squish it to the edge, flip it over as carefully as you can. And I like to rub it from the reverse. So you're pushing the paper or the card, your base, you're pushing that onto the lino rather than the lino onto the card. And I don't know if it's the warmth of your fingers or just that you're pressing the paper rather than the lino, but I find that the prints come out a bit better if I can flip it over. It's not for everyone. People find it quite tricky flipping it over without it moving. So in which case, if you're finding that you get movement when doing that, don't do it. You don't need to. But you probably just need to pay attention to the amount of ink that you apply to your lino. Okay. And I've done that for what, about 30 seconds? Something like that, 30 seconds to a minute. And make sure you get the edges, get the corners. And then all you'll need to do is just lift your card up. You can put a little fingernail just on the very edge to just hold down the lino so it doesn't come with it. And this is the big reveal. There you go, there's your first lino print. I'm quite pleased with that. So you can take a look and you can notice maybe a few things. You could notice that if there was not enough ink, then your background would have been patchy and some more of the white showing through than the colour, in which case you just need to adjust your ink for the next print. If you had too much ink, it would have been sinking into the cutout, into the grooves and channels, and you would have seen that. You would have seen that blanking out areas that should have been white. You can get a piece of scrap paper in that case, and you could blot it. You could put the piece of paper over the top and just gently rub it as evenly as you can with your hand. And that'll give what's called a ghost print, and that'll just remove some of the excess ink, and it'll just make sure it dries off a bit quicker, and you might get away with that print then. It might look quite nice, it might give quite a nice effect. Other things that maybe have gone wrong, maybe it's gone a bit too wonky. As I said, it's quite nice, quite quirky to have it a little bit not completely straight. However, if it's completely cockeyed, you might want to think about aiming for it to be more central next time. Other than that, well done, that's your first print.